sometimes at night, when all the chores, now we lived on a farm, so we had lots of chores to do. Sometimes at night, when all the chores were done, you know what we'd do? We'd sit by the fireplace in our house. We just had a little bitty house. It wasn't even as big as this room. But we'd sit by the fireplace and he'd start telling stories. I love listening to my Paul's stories. I remember he had engine stories. Stories about George Washington in the old days in our country. And I remember there was one story he used to tell. It was my favorite. It was about my grandpa. I got named after my grandpa. His name was Abraham Lincoln too, but he never got to be president. And my father used to tell how my grandpa got killed. He saw it happen. He was out in the woods one day. Now this was in Virginia. That's where my father was born. And they worked on a farm. And he said there was an Indian who came sneaking up behind my grandpa and killed him. Because you see, some of the white people had stolen some of the land that belonged to the Indians up in Ohio. Now my grandpa hadn't done that, but sometimes these things get all confused. But my father saw this happen. And you know what? He was so scared. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to run home. He had a brother. He's my uncle. Uncle Mordecai, they call him. He's very nice. He was only 14, and he ran home. But my father was so scared, he couldn't get his legs to work. He just stood there, looking at that Indian man. And the Indian man had a gun. And he said the Indian man started walking up to him. Just like that. Didn't take his eye off it. And my pa wanted to run so bad. Well, he used to tell us this story. And he'd always walk up to one of us. Right at that part in the story. And then in the story, what happened was, my pa said, oh, he wanted to call for help. And he couldn't even find his tongue. It was in there somewhere, but it wouldn't work. He was so scared. And then you know what happened? He said, just like light, all of a sudden, this great, big, tall, strong Indian man reached out and grabbed my paw. And he threw him over his shoulder just like a sack of turnips. And he started to run. My paw found his tongue. He said he started hollering because he knew what was going to happen. The Indian was going to catch him and take him back to wherever they lived, and my pa would never see his brothers or his mother again. Well, you know what he did? He started to yell. And my uncle, my father's brother, he had gone, remember I told you, he ran right away. And he got to the house, and he pulled a gun down. And just before the Indian disappeared into the woods with my paw thrown over his shoulder, he shot him. He shot the Indian. And the Indian fell down, and my paw got away. Well, it's a sad story. But I'm glad that they didn't catch my paw, because I probably wouldn't have gotten born. But because of that, you know what happened? My father's father, my grandpa, he couldn't do any of the hard work anymore on that farm. And my father had to start doing it. Every day. He was only 5 years old when this happened. And every day he had to, instead of going off to school, he had to go out in the field and help with the plowing and the planting and all of the husking and the shelling and things you do on a farm. Well, finally, my father grew up. Of course, he got married and I got born and all of that. But, oh, I love that story. So, he was pretty good at telling stories.